morning. Thanks so much for having me, and thank you, Ambassador, for the wonderful introduction. I'm excited to be here. Bună dimineața. So we live in a very interesting time. We're connected in ways that are unprecedented in human history. There's more devices, more platforms, and more content than ever before. In the industrial age, value was created by scarcity of resources. Things like coal and steel drove the economy, and they were the cornerstones of economic progress. It was the age of mass media, starting with radio, and later an age in which TV was king. But the age of mass media is over. No longer can you tell a single story in a 30, 60, or 90-second format and reach the world. We're now in an information age in which everyone is a publisher. The cost of production is lower than it's ever been. All you need is a smartphone or a laptop and an internet connection, and you can create content. And for that reason, there is more content than ever before. In 1999, people took about 80 billion photos. This was the last year in which people used film more than digital. Last year, we took 3 trillion photos. Every 2 weeks, we take more photos than we did the entire year of 1999. It is not an exaggeration to say that content is eating the world. So the question we have to ask is, how do we stand out in this environment? How do we thrive in a time in which attention is now our most scarce and valuable resource? The attention of our audience, of our fans, and our customers. Kevin Kelly, a great thinker and writer on the information age, put it this way: the only factor becoming scarce in a world of increasing abundance is the attention of your audience. So how do you make your message spread in today's hyper-competitive media environment? Well, let's start by looking at what the research says. A couple of years ago, researchers from the New York Times sat down and analyzed every article that they published, why it was shared, where it was shared, and what were the reasons behind the folks that shared it. And they had a couple of key findings. They found content that inspires high-energy emotions like anger, awe, or anxiety was shared more than content that inspired low-energy emotions like sadness. They realized that if you activated someone's emotional response, if you evoked a strong emotional response in them, people were much more likely to share their content with their friends. This is the secret behind business models like Upworthy. Upworthy is the world's fastest growing media publication. And what they do is they just scour the web for emotionally evocative content. Then they test and optimize its virality by looking at different combinations of headlines and imagery to see what gets shared the most and automatically display that content. So if you want your content to spread, it has to evoke a strong emotional response. It has to inspire someone. It has to make someone angry. It has to make them laugh. If it doesn't do those things, it's very unlikely that they'll share your content. The other thing they found was that long-form content is more likely to be shared than short-form content. When the internet was a little bit younger, there was this idea that people on the internet had short attention spans, that they wouldn't consume longer-form content. But this research actually showed the exact opposite. The greatest predictor of whether an article was to be shared or not was its length. And this doesn't just hold true for the written word. When TED Talks started posting their videos online in 2006, a lot of folks were skeptical. They said the internet was for 30-second cat videos. Who's going to watch an 18-minute talk on a topic like education? But just a few years later, these talks have been viewed billions of times. This talk by Ken Robinson on Do Schools Kill Creativity has been viewed over 37 million times. High-quality, long-form content is your best weapon. It's a myth that people on the internet have short attention spans. If you create content that's worth consuming and they engage it deeply, they'll be more likely to share it than any other type of content. The next thing they found was that content that has practical utility will be shared more likely than content that's purely informational. And this makes sense. If you answer someone's question, if you give them advice on a tough challenge they're facing, they'll share it. They'll share it for a couple of key reasons. It ties into two key motivating factors. The first is altruism, and the second is ego. I share it because I'm altruistic. I found this useful, and I want to help others I care about. I took this advice, it helped me. I think you'll appreciate getting this advice. But the other piece is ego. We post things online that reflect on us in a very positive way. So people post it simply because they want to appear smart. They want to appear in the know. They want to be a thought leader. So practical utilitarian content will always find an audience. Don't be afraid of it. This is a publication called The Bitter Southerner. It was started by a friend of mine, Chuck Reese, 2 years ago. And he started it with the simple idea that he would tell one great story about the southern United States every week. They started with no budget and no audience. But they started with an idea that the way people perceived the southern United States wasn't true. That too often it was viewed through rose-colored glasses. That this idea of southern belles and plantation houses didn't really view the real South. So he wanted to tell an authentic story. To him, he had a unique and strong worldview. He knew who his audience was, but more importantly, he knew who his audience wasn't. The founding editor put it this way: if you are a person who buys the states' rights argument for the Civil War, or you fly the Confederate flag in your front yard, or you think women look really nice in hoop skirts, we politely suggest you find other amusement on the web. The Bitter Southerner is not for you. Out of his entire audience, he took a swath and he said, I don't want you to read this. And because he did that, he was able to build a tribe who had a similar and shared worldview. And it worked. The first month they launched, they had 1,500 page views. The second month, the sixth month, 15,000. 12 months in, they were getting 150,000 page views a month. Within 2 years, they were getting 500,000 page views a month, all without any outside capital, all without any outside investment or paid advertising. As a result of their growth, they got covered in mainstream media publications like Forbes and The Guardian and National Public Radio, and that further fueled their growth. But it was for one simple reason that they were successful in a really competitive space. And that was because they had a strong and unique point of view about the world. They understood the worldview of who they wanted their audience to be, and they created content that resonated with them. Too often, people with journalistic backgrounds look and say, I want to maintain neutrality. But instead, try to seek authentic truth. And you can only find authentic truth if you have a unique perspective and point of view on the world. Don't be afraid of that. Embrace it. It'll help differentiate you. So I'm 30 slides into a talk about creating content that spreads, and I have yet to mention the word viral. So let's talk about that a little bit. There are actually two types of virality. The first type is what is called a viral meme. And this is what people talk about when they say they want to make a video go viral. When you have business folks and marketers come up to you and say, I want to create a video that everyone in the world sees. It generally looks something like this. One second you upload a video of your dog in a spider costume, and 12 months later it's been viewed 127 million times. But that type doesn't interest me as much because you can't really control the spread of it, right? What happens is a piece of content like that just happens to hit a nerve in popular culture, and everyone shares it. It just spreads throughout the web, but it's not something you can control. It's not something you can predict. What interested me more is the second type of virality, things that are engineered to be viral, things that are viral platforms that actually take advantage of network effects. It's when sharing is built into the idea itself that an idea generally has the most power. One of the most successful campaigns for a nonprofit over the past couple years was something called the Ice Bucket Challenge. And this campaign, essentially what it did was people would take a bucket, fill it with ice and water, dump it on their head, and then post a video on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Instagram, and challenge a few of their friends. They would want you to do the same. You either dump a bucket of ice water on your head, or you donate to a charity. It was an incredibly successful effort. Over the course of just a few months, they raised $50 million. They spent no money on outside advertising, no budget on PR, nothing. It spread entirely via word of mouth. But why? Why? What caused it to spread? What made it so successful? I think there's a couple of key facts that are worth looking at and keeping in mind as you go down your own path to come up with campaigns like this. Sharing was built into this campaign. It was an integral part of participating in the process. When I dumped that bucket of water on my head and challenged two friends, I automatically exposed it to other people. Therefore, it spread like wildfire. That is what I mean by being engineered to be viral. Each person it touches shares it with more than one other person. It creates what's called a high viral coefficient, and it means it spreads incredibly quickly. The other thing was it tied into that motivation of ego again. It gave people a chance to post content of themselves being charitable online. And people didn't post it just because they wanted to help out a specific charity. No, they posted it because they wanted likes and comments and retweets. It tied into our sense of vanity and therefore was very successful. There was also social pressure when you got challenged. Your entire network saw the fact that someone called you out personally and said, Adam HARREL, I want you to dump a bucket of ice on your head or donate $100. And you couldn't ignore it. You had to give in. That was the reason that it spread so quickly. And now there may be people in the audience that say, hey, this wasn't a piece of content, this was a campaign. But that's the point. I want to broaden your idea of what content is. I want you to think in terms of campaign, not just content. When you're trying to tell a story, think through, how can I build this beyond just a simple article or a report? A great example is I Paid a Bribe. An Indian nonprofit created this campaign and this platform because they were tired of the bribery and corruption that was endemic to their country. So they created a website where anyone could go online and report each time they paid a bribe. Since they launched this site, it's been viewed 11 million times. Over 71,000 bribes have been reported. Had they written an article, created a report, or posted a PDF, there's no way it would have had that reach. Instead, they created a utility, they created a tool, and they created a platform. And because of that, it spread widely and was viewed around the world. At the heart of all campaigns, though, are stories well told. And telling stories well is a challenge, but to those that often come up to me after I talk and they say, I don't have a story I can quite figure out to tell. I don't believe that, my story is going to resonate. To you, I say this. If Coca-Cola, which is nothing more than sugary, fizzy water, can tell stories that the world appreciates, so can you. The truth is, humans are storytelling animals. Long before we watched videos of dogs in spider costumes, we sat around campfires. We told stories of doomed love, victories in war, and tragedies. It's in our nature. It's innate. It's innate within us. But the story itself isn't enough. You have to rely on word of mouth to make your story spread, especially when budgets are at a premium. And the only way to do that is to be remarkable. In the modern world, only remarkable things get talked about. In 1898, the Lumiere brothers, some of the first people in film, premiered a new film in London and Paris and New York. It sold out theaters. The film was nothing but a train arriving at the station. It was a 30-second movie, and that's all it showed. It was called The Arrival. It showed a train pulling in and stopping. And people got up at the end of it, and they applauded. They were so amazed to see a train pull on a big screen. People actually ducked. They thought the train was going to hit them. But our standards are much higher now. Everyone in this room is an expert consumer of content. You no longer notice things that are simply well done. You no longer talk about things that are just good. You only mention those things that are truly remarkable. And that's the challenge before everyone today. The other thing I would urge is that you don't limit yourself just to ideas that are digital in execution only. It's really easy as people that love the internet to put a box around our ideas and say, how do we create a digital campaign that does this? But also try to think through how you can use digital to drive things that happen in the real world. Red Bull sent a man to space, and the world watched. They did it because it was interesting and it was hard, and everybody watched this guy jump out of a space capsule and skydive. Now, you may not be able to send a man to space, but there are interesting things you can do in the real world that drive digital conversations. This conference is a great example. This hashtag is going to be full of great tweets and insightful takes, and it would have never existed if we didn't bring people together in the real world. So think through how you can bring people together around a common cause and worldview to drive that online activity. Don't limit yourself solely to the digital realm. The last thing I would urge you is to find creativity within constraints. Even if all you're doing is writing a simple article, there's still an opportunity to do something remarkable. One of my favorite examples is before Gabriel Garcia Marquez won a Nobel Prize, he was a newspaper writer. And he started off an article with this sentence, with this paragraph. Several years ago, a ghostly, classy-looking man with a big stomach as taut as a drum came to a doctor's office in the city. He said, "Doctor, I have come to have you remove a monkey that was put in my belly." It was the first sentence of the lead-in to his article. And if I read that, there's no way I wouldn't finish the article. And I would share it, and I would post it, and I would talk about it with my friends. Even within a format that is as limited as a newspaper article, you can do remarkable things. But you can only do it if you find creativity within the restraints that you're given. And as we go on this journey to create content that spreads, I want to leave you with one final piece of advice. This is from another author, one of my favorites, a guy named Kurt Vonnegut. And he taught literature and writing at a school in the Midwest in the United States. And he had a student that came to him and said, "What piece of advice would you give to an aspiring author?" And this is what he said. He said, "Use the time of a total stranger in such a way that he or she will not feel the time is wasted." So as you go out, don't just create content. Create stories worth telling, create remarkable experiences, and do amazing things that people can't help but talk about. Thank you, and enjoy the conference.